Hi, everybody. Brian Norcross here, and good Saturday afternoon. Wanted to bring you up to date here on what's going on with Hurricane Erin, which put on an incredible show today, intensifying spectacularly rapidly into 160 mile an hour Category 5 hurricane, thankfully north of the Caribbean islands and far enough offshore that we're not going to get any direct impacts on the islands. All right, let's take a look at the latest advisory from the National Hurricane Center, which was at 5 p.m. Eastern Time today. Winds still estimated at 160 miles per hour. Now, that estimate came from a flight that was in there, Hurricane Hunter flight that was in there before the 2 p.m. advisory. And as of now, 6 p.m., there's another NOAA research aircraft on the way in there, and we'll get an update here this evening. There are some changes going on with the system right now that could affect the intensity. Maybe it's gone up a little bit and then we'll be heading back down. And I'll explain that in a second when we look at the close-up satellite picture. Moving to the west at 15, it's actually just a little bit north of due west. That was the pressure measured earlier, 915 millibars. Just for reference, that's lower than Hurricane Andrew was when it came ashore in South Dade now 33 years ago. Here's close up as the sun is going down over that part of the Atlantic. And there you see it's well north of the islands. And there you can see that little bit north of due west trajectory on the system right now. Going super close up, we can kind of make out that the eye right in there, the small eye, you see it's kind of filling with clouds. Well, this is a process called an eyewall replacement cycle. The previous Hurricane Hunter said that they could detect that there was a small eye, it was only about 5 miles across, and then a larger eye was forming, it's about 35 miles across. So what happens is the larger eye forms, chokes off the smaller eye, the larger eye becomes the dominant one. Because it's like a figure skater expanding the arms out, the speed of the rotation slows down some, but the system grows in size, and the winds, the overall winds, become a larger diameter system, and then that larger eye contracts and it re-intensifies again, but now you have a larger system. And because the energy is spread out over the larger system, you've kind of arrested this incredible increase in wind speed. So we think that's what's going on. It's why we send the airplanes in there to figure it out exactly, and then we'll know exactly what the situation is. All right, here on the radar coming out of San Juan, it's not San Juan, actually. It's up on the mountain in Puerto Rico, and so it's a pretty good stretch out there. So we're just seeing part of the Eyewall out there, but we're also seeing these very strong bands passing over the Virgin Islands, flash flooding in the Virgin Islands now. They have the warning up for that because you can see it's just continuous, the trajectory of those bands right over the Virgin Islands, not getting to Puerto Rico yet, but once we get the storm passed over here, then the southern bands that are kind of out of radar range or on the edge of radar range here are affecting the Leeward Islands. Now, they're going to move over the Virgin Islands and over Puerto Rico, and the winds are going to switch around and come in from the south and southwest. So with the mountains here in Puerto Rico and those winds coming like this is going to happen tomorrow. This can cause flash flooding on the hillsides that are exposed to the wind and the moisture. So that's a real possibility in Puerto Rico. So this is going to go by without the core affecting land, but still these outer bands are significant and they are going to affect these islands. We still have, for a few islands over here, they still have tropical storm watches up, St. Martin, St. Bart's, but generally this is not an issue. These watches are issued by the national government. So for instance, Saint-Martin, the French part of St. Martin, what we call St. Martin, that is done by the Météo France, the French agency. Anguilla, that's the Brits are responsible for that because it's the British Virgin Islands up in there, and Anguilla is near there. And then we have the Dutch meteorology people doing it for the Dutch part of St. Martin, and so forth and so on. So anyway, we have watches up for some of those islands there. Now we also have watches up for the Turks and Caicos Islands, and we'll show you more of that here in just a second. Here's the cone, and you see the estimate is 160 miles per hour tomorrow morning, tomorrow evening, then slowly decreasing as actually the atmosphere is not quite as conducive, but mostly the system is expanding in size, and because of that, the Turks and Caicos are a bit too close for comfort, so they put up a watch. And here you can see this is the chances of winds of 40 miles per hour or higher. And you notice with Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands there, they're down in the maybe 5% chance. So that's why there are no watches up for them. The thinking is that this is where the strong winds are going to be, well offshore. But when we get up here to the Turks and Caicos Islands, as the system grows in size, notice they're here in the light greens. So up in the 20 to 30% range there on those islands, less so on Grand Turk over here, but up at Providenciales and so forth in those islands, they have a little better chance. So they put up a tropical storm watch, meaning the possibility of winds 40 miles per hour or higher. But you can see that the system is curving north. They're going to stay away for the most part from the Bahamian island chain. Here's the wide view of the cone, and you can see winds of 150 is their estimate here, and then slowly decreasing as we go forward in time into Wednesday and Thursday. And it looks like everything we know, the high probabilities is that this system is going to split the uprights here between the U.S. and Bermuda somewhere in that cone. Now, we have a little bit of conflicting information this afternoon. The European model came in on the left side of the cone, still in the cone, but we'll see that in just a moment. So here's the close-up here when we get to the part of the cone that affects the U.S. and maybe Bermuda, and then we can put the uncertainty models on there. So the wider this is, the more uncertain it is. If they're all clustered together, that gives us higher confidence that that's where it's going. So here we are, Tuesday, later in the day, and you see we have this cluster in the cone, and then the blue X, that's the Google DeepMind AI model, and the green X, that's the European AI model. So you see these two. We add that on there because we're looking at that this hurricane season. Okay, so that's Tuesday later in the day. Let's go forward in time and see. Now we're Wednesday late in the day. You see the model spread out some. That's why the cone gets bigger. But you notice that the main cluster is here, because the European model this afternoon has kind of shifted left a little bit to the left side of the cone, but still well offshore of the United States. And what we expect to happen is the storm will grow in size, but more to the right than to the left because it's moving north, and that's just the way with this forward movement picking up, that adds to the right side of the system, so it doesn't grow quite symmetrically. But then as we go, this is Wednesday, late Wednesday, watch as it goes on Thursday morning and Thursday evening, and just kind of speeds away on Friday. So high confidence that this system is going to stay here in the cone in between Cape Hatteras and Bermuda. But if it does go to the left side of the cone, somewhere over in here, we're going to get noticeable gusty winds over Cape Hatteras, at least the eastern part of North Carolina, maybe into the Tidewater, maybe. We'll see exactly as we get closer, and the Hurricane Center puts up tropical storm watches or something like that. I can't rule that out there, but everything we know says that the core of this storm is going to stay well offshore, and the main effect on the East Coast is going to be in the ocean, as the energy put in the ocean. Now, we get out of these models the wave height forecast. So these are not waves crashing on the beaches. These are waves out in the ocean, and you can just picture seeing a ship out in the ocean and the waves and so forth. How high will the waves be? And you can see that the model here, this is the European model, Tuesday morning, Then you can see the peak is in the pinks here, the pinks to the whites. So up in the 25-foot range, waves there off the Bahamas with that energy being pushed against the islands Tuesday morning and starting to approach here in the southeast from about Palm Beach County in Florida on north to Cape Hatteras. So that's Tuesday morning in the Bahamas, moving north. Okay, let's watch the time here as we go forward. Now we're Tuesday evening, Wednesday morning, and you can see this surge of energy here pushing now from about Cape Canaveral on up to Cape Hatteras. This is going to be strong swells, very dangerous currents, big waves, eroding waves, and so forth, eroding waves and currents on those shorelines. And of course, we have concern for Cape Hatteras because that's such a vulnerable place, and the National Hurricane Center will warn us about that. Now, notice the European model right on the edge of the cone here. So is this going to mean the cone will shift a little bit left? It might, but we'll see when the next run of the model comes out, see if it adjusts back to the right, which we normally see that with these models, which you know if you look at them online. All right, and then we get to Thursday, and this is the area from Cape Hatteras on up past the Delmarva, Ocean City, onto Rehoboth, and points north, the Jersey Shore, along Long Island, Fire Island, the Hamptons, and so forth. This is when the main energy is going to be in there on Thursday. Now, we'll just see exactly how it coordinates with the tides and so forth when the big push is, but plan on boating and beach conditions being potentially hazardous in there on Thursday. And then we get to Friday and things are moving away, and we should be in much better shape by the weekend with the energy being well offshore. But for the second half of the week, the whole East Coast may be feeling this storm. Exactly how much and exactly the timing, we'll see as we get closer in time. But anyway, this is a potential threat for the East Coast. All right, that's where we stand with Hurricane Erin right now. I mean, we're feeling good, that very, very good, that this is going to stay offshore of the U.S. East Coast, but we are going to feel effects, and exactly the level of those effects remains to be seen because we're still obviously a few days from this happening, and the National Hurricane Center will put up the watches and so forth, and then any kind of storm surge that is going to come out of this, we'll know about that at least 2 days in advance.